The Legislature in Guam is back from recess. Welcome back, colleagues. We're again on second reading. We're continuing now with Bill number 181-37 COR. Senator Barnett, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I motion to place Bill number 181-37 COR as amended by the Committee on Education, Public Safety, and the Arts into the third. I'm going to read the title. It's an act to add a new Article 4 to Chapter 77, Title 10, Guam Code, annotated relative to allowing the use of body-worn cameras by uniformed officers of the Guam Police Department. It's sponsored by myself, Senator Chris Barnett, Senator Tello T. Taitagui, Senator William Parkinson, Senator Roy Kanata, Senator Chris Duenas, also my Vice Chair for Public Safety, Senator Joseph Augustine, Senator Amanda Shelton, Senator Wayne St. Nicholas, Senator Tom Fisher, and Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes. And I motion to place the bill in the third reading file for discussion.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Bill 181-37 COR is amended by the Committee on Education, Public Safety, and the Arts. It's a pretty simple bill. Like AEDs and schools that can meet basic health and safety standards, like a hospital facility that can meet the needs of its people. I feel this measure is long overdue. And I ask the support of my colleagues. I want to thank them also for co-sponsoring the measure. The public hearing was smooth. It saw support and testimony from the Chief of Police. In fact, the Guam Police Department is currently procuring body-worn cameras. Thanks to a federal grant and matching funds, which was allocated out of their budget, so there's no questions of funding for this measure. And what the measure does is it authorizes the Chief of Police to start a pilot program for body-worn cameras. And in his testimony, the chief had said that he wanted to first start with 43 officers. And his intention is to start with the patrol officers, because obviously they're the ones the most front-facing in the Guam Police Department, and then eventually move to the CID, Criminal Investigation Division, and also the Special Operations Division. And his testimony was very encouraging. He did offer several suggestions that he said would improve the bill, and I agree, and that's why we added those sections in the bill that you see before you. The Chief of Police also talked about studies that show that the use of body-worn cameras often diffuse situations, many times before they even become a situation. And I believe that's because the officers and the public in jurisdictions where they use body-worn cameras probably feels like they're being watched. And I know my colleagues can relate. Well, they got these cameras on us, every second of the hour being watched, and it kind of reminds me, hey, stand up straight, no slouching, look busy, etc. And I think it goes the same for the police department. We have a lot of great men and women who wear the uniform and serve our island every day. And I believe the use of body-worn cameras goes obviously a long way to protect the people, the public, who interact with these officers. But it also goes a long way to protect the officers as well. As Lord knows, we have seen instances of brutality committed at the hands of law enforcement on our island. There's no doubt about that. But we have also seen, and I'm also aware of, other instances where law enforcement's wrongly accused of brutality, where allegations are made and investigations conducted only to find that there was no wrongdoing on the part of the officer. So the body-worn cameras offer protections, again, not just for the public, but for the officers who serve the people of Guam. Included in the measure, the parameters of which the body cam recordings can be released, which, coming from the media, I had my thoughts on who and how, who should be able to access these recordings, how they could be accessed under what circumstances. But I wanted to be careful because I don't think worn body camera footage is the same as documents that you would send a FOIA for. I think there's, in many cases, a reasonable expectation of privacy that's to be considered, and that's why we follow the chief's instructions in the bill. And so body cam recordings, the release, are not public information as defined by Chapter 10, 5 GCA. The chief of police has the discretion on the release of body cam recordings. And then we basically mirrored similar language that we find in jurisdictions that use body-worn cameras. And so upon a court order, including warrants, subpoenas, summons, discovery, such recording shall remain confidential on the possession or custody of the receiving party unless ordered by a court or the chief. And instances, again, where the public interest outweighs the need for confidentiality, the release of such recordings should not occur at such a time the release may impair, hinder, or disrupt an investigation or trial. Many times, what we see in the states, for example, is chiefs of police using their discretion to release body-worn camera footage, oftentimes before a situation goes to trial, and many times to clear the record, to counter information that already exists in the media. And so again, I'm hoping that this measure can pass. I'm hoping that the support of my colleagues will hold through to the vote. Again, I think this is, it's really a no-nonsense, long overdue measure that increases accountability, transparency for those who wear the uniform. And it also, this pilot program, I think, will serve as a great way for us to kind of conduct that litmus test where we see what works with the Guam Police Department, and then we apply it to other law enforcement, because we were talking about the Park Patrol earlier today, and I know they're relatively, I don't want to say new, they're back on the scene, let's say that, but they're going to be out here interacting with the public, in some cases as much as the Guam Police Department. So I wish this program the success, and I think that there may be a point where we come back and revisit this program and the policy of body-worn cameras, and maybe look at how we can apply it to other law enforcement entities across the government of Guam. Because the more accountability and the more transparency, the better. So I thank the men and women of the Guam Police Department for their support of this measure. I did ask the Chief of Police, and I'm going to go ahead and read from the committee report here. I believe there's support for the body-worn cameras. I had asked the chief if he believed there was support for it in the rank and file. And if you look at some of the literature, again, in the Department of Justice report, some of the highlights report a decrease in the number of citizens' complaints against the officers and a decrease in officer misconduct. In one department, it was noted to have decreased by as much as 75%. So there is a value and advantage to the community, not only to the police department, but to the community as well, in having body-worn cameras recording the activities of the officers and their encounters with their citizens. And again, just to close on this, I think it's very important, because sometimes we do get those few bad mangoes that wear the badge. But in other times, like I said, we get the officers who are falsely accused. And I can think of a case most recently that was shared across all social media platforms that made some very heavy allegations against law enforcement. And come to find out, and looking and just kind of scratching the surface of the case, it definitely doesn't look like what it was reported to be. And so again, please ask the support of my colleagues and their vote for this measure. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Sidus Masi.
Sidus Masi, Senator Barnett. Vice Speaker, you're recognized on the bill, and then Senator Duenas.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak and rise in support of this Measure 187-37 COR, and I'd like to thank the author of the legislation for adding me on to the 10th co-sponsorship of this bill. As noted by the author, this bill intends to authorize the Guam Police Department to implement the body-worn camera program and to allow, of course, the Chief of Police to develop the rules and regulations to run this program, Madam Speaker. And as we look at the mechanics of having to do this program, I want to say that in the spirit of technology today and how things get transpired almost instantaneously, having this program implemented with the Guam Police Department, for me, is a very good thing, and I'm hoping that my colleagues will support the same efforts. I know, as in everything, if you have the resources and if you have the money, you can buy the equipment and you can buy the supplies and you can buy the program or the software or the hardware needed to run the program. I want to share with you, Madam Speaker, that when I looked at the fiscal note coming from the Bureau of Budget Management's office, BBMR, they talked about the plan on how much each cost would be, how much it would be needed to run the program. Would it be a startup program? Would how many officers would it take? And in the ultimate end, depending on which plan the government chooses to decide, it could probably cost an additional budget to the Guam Police Department of $90,000. $90,000 definitely worth the time to get this program implemented. But this report also states that it doesn't stop the Guam Police Department, Madam Speaker, from doing everything it takes to apply for grants that are out there. And as the retiring speaker spoke about the accountability and transparency and what it's done, it literally having this camera on, the officer would literally take to the transparency of the incident that occurs or what's happening. And as also noted, right, sometimes things are done in good gist and sometimes things are not done in good gist. And when you have a camera, they say a picture can tell 1,000 words. When you have a video camera, it can tell it all. And it has been proven already. I know that on a personal note, one or two officers, for their security, felt that a body cam would be good for them, for their safety. So in this effort, I don't take it as just a program good for the Guam Police Department and even hopefully the law enforcement community across the board. I think it's good for both the community, the officers, and the program, the agency that will support this program, because this literally has the instantaneous recording of what is going on in a situation. And I really applaud the efforts of the author of this legislation for doing this, because some may say this may not be so good, but I really think for the safety and the welfare for the law enforcement officers and for the community itself, I think it's a win-win. So, Madam Speaker, I definitely rise in support of this measure. I thank again the good author from Talafofo for giving me the opportunity, or Jonia, right? Jonia or Talafofo? For giving me the opportunity to be a part of his co-sponsorship, and I really am hoping that we could get a unanimous support for this measure, and thank you for letting me speak. Saina Masi.
Vice Speaker. Senator Duenas on the bill, you are recognized.
Sidus Masi, Madam Chair, and I certainly rise in full support of Bill 181-37, and I was very thankful to have been given the opportunity to be a co-sponsor. Madam Speaker, one of my fondest memories, my first interaction with law enforcement was when I was in high school. One of my cousins joined the police force, and being that at the time, many of us in a very small community shared vehicles for different activities that we had to go to, and I was part of the driver once in a while to drive him up to GCC to go through his training courses to become a police officer. And that having that experience in a small community that I lived in with one of our own becoming an officer and watching him go through the ranks was my first interaction with a very positive interaction within the police force, and really realizing what officers go through in terms of their training and then the day-to-day operations on the job. And then, of course, later on in life, I was fortunate to be tapped as the Department of Youth Affairs Director. And then I really got a full view of what overall law enforcement was about. I was once again fortunate to be tapped by Chuck Atta at one point to be the Civilian Military Task Force Public Safety Overall Chair for the development of the build-up. Then I got really deep into really the lives and daily lives of all branches of law enforcement and the effects of the operations. Now, it's not always rosy. I mean, we've seen ups and downs. We've had, difficulty from time to time with regard to reports and evidence and situations where officers that decided to go outside of the law themselves, unfortunately fell on that side of the law, and of course were held accountable. So really, not a lot to add to a lot of the great comments that have already been made, but wanted to say one thing. In my experience and what I learned over the years throughout law enforcement and the service in government at the executive level is, in every agency, but particularly in law enforcement, it's about a culture. And when you have a culture of accountability, when you have a culture to where officers are first and foremost responsible, of course, of their duties to the public, but also they have a duty and responsibility to each other. And every level of layer of accountability that we can put into that culture just can do nothing but improve it. And so when I was offered to be a co-sponsor on this, I was happy. And I think even in our nation and in other forces, we've seen the effects, as the author has mentioned, on both sides, to where it protects, of course, the public, but then also where it's pointed out that maybe the training wasn't good enough, or someone just decided that, through whatever's going on in their life, they weren't going to carry out their duties in the right way in terms of their oath and what they swore to serve and protect. So I think it's just very rarely can we always find kind of what I think is a win-win a lot of times when we introduce things, and I think that this is one of the examples of a win-win. And I think that this legislation, and I think that's why most of the officers and even people that I've interacted with over the years support efforts like this, because they are true to their calling, and they are true to the reason why they wake up every day and put on those uniforms and go out and risk their lives, not knowing if they're going to come home to their family. That cause is noble for them, and that cause is something that they truly believe in. And so I think that's why we got the overwhelming support from the men and women in blue and throughout law enforcement, and hopefully it will grow once again and foster a culture of accountability and a culture of duty of service. And so I'm thankful to be a co-sponsor, and I also join my colleagues in hoping that this crucial piece of legislation, in my opinion, receives unanimous support. Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker.
Sidus Masi. Senator Duenas. On the bill, Senator Fisher, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to address the following question to the author. It says under Section 77403, the Chief of Police is authorized to develop a body cam program for the Guam Police Department. In the opinion of the author, does Section 77403 mandate the creation of a body cam program?
You're asking the sponsor to yield? Would the sponsor yield to that question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Sure. It authorizes the Chief of Police to develop a body cam program. The Guam Police Department has in its general orders the whole section that governs the use of body-worn cameras, so they're good to go. And I'm not sure if I could pick the Senator Fisher's brain. Is this a semantics issue? Because I don't necessarily think that this section mandates it because they're already implementing it, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Fisher, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. Follow-up question to the author, if I may, ma'am. I'd like to, this is a point of inquiry for the author. Without this bill, let's assume the bill was not written nor filed, could the Chief of Police develop and implement a body cam program for the Guam Police Department?
Would the sponsor yield to that question?
Thank you. That's a great question. And I think that the Chief of Police he could institute a body cam program, but the problem would be is that we would have nothing on the books that deals with the release of the footage or anything related to that matter that allows this footage to be used in criminal proceedings, that allows this footage to be used as part of a discovery. So those are really kind of the areas that I wanted to cover with the bill because, you know, Senator Fisher, I'm not going to say he's right, but the Chief of Police could implement a body-worn camera program, sure, but there would be a whole lot of gray area that would remain uncovered if we didn't have a bill like this in place to cover those areas. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Fisher.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the author for the responses. Ma'am, I would just like to make an observation that without this bill, the footage which might be collected in a body camera program would most certainly be discoverable if it is relevant. Those are the rules. So I don't think there's anything, well, I'm confident there's nothing that would prohibit the use of this in discovery or the production of it in discovery. And for those of my colleagues, discovery is the process whereby parties in a criminal matter and a civil matter will exchange information. So in a criminal matter, obviously, the Guam Police Department will submit information to the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General's office, unless they get a protective order, will be required to produce it in discovery. I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to stand necessarily in the way of this, but when I keep in mind, ma'am, that the Guam Police Department could, if they wanted to, implement this program, and when they collect information that would be subject to the well-known, well-litigated rules of discovery that all the judges employ and that have been on the Guam books since, I don't know, the beginning of time, Section 77404 may have the unintended consequence of limiting discovery. In other words, limiting the right of people to know what happened. Because when we look at, I think it's page 2 under 77404, and we look
page
at...
3.
Page 3? Yes, thank you very much. Page 3 of the bill at section 77404, line 10, the phrase, the sentence begins, generally, body cam recordings may be released. The author may consider amending his own bill to strike the word generally and change the permissive verb may to the mandatory shall. So when shall it be released? Upon a court order. Regardless of what this bill says, a court order is going to trump it. But if a court orders, if there is a subpoena or a subpoena ducis tecum The Guam Police Department and the Attorney General's Office will comply under penalty of punishment from the Superior Court. So he may think about that. Section B of 77404, beginning at line 15, is troublesome since it allows broad discretion for the chief of police to determine when a video might impair, hinder, or disrupt an investigation or trial. As a practitioner, I can tell you frequently, I hope from time to time that information I produce will, in fact, disrupt the trial. Because as a defense counsel, it is your duty. It's your duty to fight as zealously as possible as you can for a client. I just worry that this particular phrase will be overread, and someone, maliciously or not, will say, well, this piece of information is going to screw up our case, so we're going to hold on to it. I think that that particular provision allows it. On page 4, ma'am, beginning at line 4, it says that body cam recordings of encounters with juveniles are not to be made public. I don't know what an encounter with a juvenile is. What if the juvenile is a witness as opposed to a victim? Wouldn't it be appropriate to turn over what the victim or the witness was saying about what happened? Encounters with victims of family violence, child abuse, child pornography, human trafficking, criminal sexual conduct, victims of violent crimes. And I'd like to ask, I'll probably ask another question about this, but these are videos of a crime scene. These are videos of a crime scene. Why in the world would you not want that disclosed? Photographs of crime scenes, of criminal sexual conduct, of violent crimes, etc., and so forth, are routinely disclosed. I don't see a functional difference between a video and a photograph here. And then, so I've got I'm a co-signature on this. I supported this bill, but I like the bill because if it were mandatory for GPD to wear body cams, I would be much more comfortable with it. If we were much more careful about our choice of verbs, and if we were much more careful about the knock-on effect of limiting a defendant's constitutional right to discovery, I would be more comfortable. And then I guess a final question to the author, if I could, ma'am. The question would be, you used the phrase in the bill, and you used the phrase in your opening remark, reasonable expectation of privacy. In the author's opinion, if he'll yield to the question, who does the expectation of privacy belong to? The government, the Guam Police Department, the victim, or the witness?
Are you asking the author? Would the author yield to that question? What?
Ma'am, could the question be restated?
Certainly. Yes, Speaker. The question is that the phrase is used in the bill, reasonable expectation of privacy, and in the author's opening remarks, he also used the phrase reasonable expectation of privacy, which is a phrase, commonly heard in relationship to the Fourth Amendment. But who does the reasonable expectation of privacy belong to? Is it the Guam Police Department? Is it the government of Guam? Is it the victim? Is it a witness? And so that's my question, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. I really appreciate the insight that Senator Fisher's proffered. Obviously, I'm not a defense lawyer, and he's bringing a lot of really good information to this bill, and I thank him for his co-sponsorship and also for his input as we're currently trying to amend some of the sections. Right. So the question is, do suspects have a right to privacy in a law enforcement interrogation room? Typically, no, but if a recording device is hidden and a reasonable person would believe the room was not monitored, the suspect may have an expectation of privacy. But ma'am, this language again came from the chief of police. In his written testimony, he had asked us to amend the measure and the section which includes that language. And so if Senator Fisher has any further insight or any inclination as to how we could amend this section to make it stronger or, more likely to garner his support, I would appreciate that, ma'am. Thank you.
And thank you, Speaker, for the question as well as the answer. I'm just going to bang away a little bit on this reasonable expectation of privacy. We really have to understand who has the expectation. We would never want the government to think that they owned the expectation. We would never want the police department to think that they owned the expectation. The expectation must reside with either the defendant or a witness. And so we should think about that. I don't really have any more substantive comments on the bill, and I don't want Senator Barnett to think that I'm, busting his chops on this one, because okay, I am busting your chops. Okay, and I am a co-signatory on the bill, but well, I'm going to think a little bit more about it. But I thank Senator Barnett for bringing it forward, and I thank him for also beginning this discussion on body cams for police officers. It is really a worthwhile thing. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Senator Fisher. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? No, we're going to take a 2-minute recess. We're back from recess. Senator Barnett, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm working on a couple amendments. Again, I'd like to thank my colleagues and Senator Fisher and you as well for your input into the measure, but I don't want to take an hour recess. I got to work on these amendments, so can I move my bill a little bit further down on the agenda so that we can proceed with everything else?
Is there any objection to tabling the discussion on this bill until later, and we will proceed with the rest of the items on the agenda? Is there any objection? Is there seeing no objection, motion carries. Proceeding with the second reading, we're now on resolution number 226-37. Vice Speaker Tina Muñoz Barnes, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move that resolution number 226-37 COR is introduced by myself, which is a relative to exercising the right to petition pursuant to section 1423K of 48 U.S.C. Chapter 8, relative to supporting statehood for the people of Washington, D.C., and specifically urging the United States Congress to pass H.R. 51 and S. 51 to the third reading file, and if I could just speak on it, Madam Speaker.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Madam Speaker. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak about this resolution 226-37 COR, which 226-37 COR, which seeks to support self-determination for our nation's capital, a fellow jurisdiction without full representation in the federal government. As mentioned, Madam Speaker, during the public hearing of this resolution by DC's Shadow Senator Paul Stroud, and Madam Speaker, I may add, thank you for coming to that public hearing. Our local legislature is unique because in addition to being an official stated policy of this body, it can also serve to petition the United States Congress to begin the process to welcome D.C. as the 51st state of the Union. The right to petition invoked in this measure comes with immediate progress. According to Senator Strauss, this resolution will invoke the special obligations of Congress to consider this matter expeditiously. For the benefit of the public, Madam Speaker, as is this honorable goal of self-determination, the desired move to statehood that this resolution supports is the will of the eligible voters for that question. Madam Speaker, this measure stands in solidarity with the 2016 plebiscite conducted in 2016, and in this election, 86% of the voters supported advancing Washington, D.C.'s political status through statehood. Colleagues, as the saying goes, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And as this body has done countless times in its history, we have yet another opportunity to express our desire to right a wrong, to stand shoulder to shoulder with people whose suffering, as we know all too well, to state with a clear, unified voice that change has to happen. But Madam Speaker, I must confess that there is a direct benefit for Guam in here, and that is the chance to deepen an already strong relationship with the leaders in Washington who are at the forefront of their own quest for self-determination. Because our journey has not only been long and difficult, at times it has been a lonely road to travel, and I know you know that, Madam Speaker. Fundamental change is always hard to accomplish, but for those of us who remain as remnants of America's colonial past, we don't have to go through this by ourselves. In fact, our struggles become easier to bear when we band together. Senator Strauss has been a good friend to Guam and has advocated for our plights and quest to determine our political future in important forums and groups like the Underrepresented Peoples and Nations Organization, which is UPNO. As a happy accident, while Senator Strauss was on island not too long ago for the public hearing, he was able to attend the Independence Day celebration for the Federated States of Micronesia. And during the event, there was a discussion about our history, our shared history of navigation of Micronesians' expertise in traversing the Pacific in our canoes. But in order for anyone to get to their destination, Madam Speaker, they must move their paddles in the same direction. During the resolution's hearing, Senator Strauss reflected on these words and said, considering D.C., Guam and other territories are in the same proverbial boat, that we should continue to strategize with each other to build on our understanding for our respective people's desires and histories, and that we continue to help each other move to our next political destination. Madam Speaker, that is my ultimate hope, that we can use this resolution to help build that understanding, that unified strategy for us, for the CNMI, for American Samoa, for Puerto Rico, for the U.S. Virgin Islands, and for Washington, D.C. So on that one day, we can all be full participants in democracy. And Madam Speaker, I also said, well, maybe some of my colleagues might ask a couple of questions, and I'd like to just throw it out there. Some of the questions might be, why do this for DC when we have so much to do on Guam? Or what does this have to do with our island of Guam? Or what is this right to petition mentioned in this resolution? And I just want to share with you, Madam Speaker, that why do this for DC when we have so much to do on Guam? This measure doesn't take away any resources or momentum away from our local self-determination efforts. In fact, I see it as a way to help advance our quest by strengthening our relationships with allies in the District of Columbia. I am confident that the leaders in the nation's capital will reciprocate our advocacy and support when our island is ready to send the results of our own plebiscite to Congress for their consideration and action. What does it have to do with Guam? Madam Speaker and colleagues, we are not the only ones who are stuck in the status quo of limited self-government. By reaching out to our fellow territories in D.C., we are magnifying these long-standing issues and helping to elevate it in the eyes of our representatives and senators in Congress. And since Guam is not the biggest or most connected of the U.S. non-self-governing territories, we benefit by reminding these federal lawmakers that our situation is very similar to that of D.C., Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands, all of which are considerably closer to the capital. That other question, what is the right to petition mentioned in the resolution? Section 21 of the Organic Act of Guam, which is cited in federal law as 48 U.S.C. Chapter 8, Section 1423K, grants that, quote, the legislature or any person or group of persons in Guam shall have the unrestricted right to petition. It shall be the duty of all officers of the government to receive and without delay to act upon or forward, as the case may require, any such petition. This is distinct from the protection to petition the government found in the First Amendment of the Constitution, which bars Congress from enacting any law that abridges the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances in one important way. Madam Speaker, our Organic Act says that the Guam Legislature's petition, or indeed one from any person or group, is met with a duty to receive and act upon it without delay. I will, Madam Speaker, be tracking the progress of this resolution to see how this current Congress will meet this duty of federal law, and will use it as an indicator for how it will receive other petitions from this august body on other long-standing issues between Guam's people and the United States federal government. So, Madam Speaker, with that being said, and knowing that this issue has been long awaiting for even folks like us here on our island, I felt it important that we share in the efforts and the plight of what Washington, D.C. is doing, and support their efforts too, and hopefully one day we'll get even closer to determining how we should govern ourselves. So with that, Madam Speaker, I humbly ask my colleagues to support this measure and extend my undangkal na sidzuas masi, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to speak on this measure within the time frame, and ask my colleagues to please support this resolution unanimously. Sidzuas masi and Zensaina masi.
Sidzuas masi, Vice Speaker. On the resolution, is there anyone who'd like to speak on the resolution? On the resolution. If not, then Vice Speaker, you may close on the resolution.
Sidzuas masi, Madam Speaker, and I really hope that even with that, that my colleagues will support the efforts and assist in the advocacy for Washington, D.C. to follow their journey through what their more than 86% of their people have voted for. So I ask that this resolution be moved to the third reading voting file. Saina masi.
All right, on the motion to move the resolution to the third reading file, Resolution 226-37. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. All right, so we have 3 items left. These are items that were placed further down on the agenda. We will take these up tomorrow morning. There are 2 committee of the whole items, and then the bill that we just moved down was Bill 181, the body cams. So we have Bill 107, to fund Guam Housing Corporation Rural Housing Service Escrow Savings Account, and Bill 120 regarding the apprenticeship program. All right, so Senator San Augustine, I know you're prepared to go into committee of the whole in the morning. We also have another bill. Should we do committee of the whole first? Yeah, we'll proceed then.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, just advise that my colleagues, when we start with the Bill 120, we will have Department of Labor folks here, we'll have GITA and Revenue and Tax, and then when we move to the bill that deals with Guam Housing, we're going to get a hold of folks at Guam Housing, folks at BBMR, and OFB will be here, so we can discuss that funding of the $500,000. Okay?
Okay, so we'll begin with Bill number 120. We're going to have a slight change in schedule. We'll begin with 120 tomorrow morning, Committee of the Whole. We'll proceed to 107, and then we will conclude with Bill number 181 in regular second reading. All right, Sidzuas masi. Okay, so we will recess until tomorrow at 9 a.m. Recess until 9 a.m.